breaking news that is coming out of Washington, D.C. Just this morning, a lot of warnings were issued by Pete Hegseth, by the Trump administration, by embassies. It is a really long list, actually. And that's what we talked about. Almost the frequency in this and the timing that they're all together and all these warnings are coming in. I mean, I woke up, opened up my social media, and I feel like, as someone who's pretty connected to what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening in Israel, it was overwhelming, the amount of news that was coming in.
This hasn't happened in this way since back in 2015.
Indicating that we may be heading into a real conflict.
And what we know is that the Iranians have warned that even if it's Israel that strikes them, that they will retaliate by trying and attempting to strike U.S. installations in the region, whether it be embassies and consulates or whether it be military installations. We have a lot of large bases there. One of the largest air bases is in Bahrain, which is just across the Persian Gulf from Iran, the Gulf of Arabia, depending on what you want to call it, as well as you have situations in Israel, Iraq, and Kuwait. And we're going to break down all of these because it's all pointing to something bigger happening. This is also with the Americans meeting with the Iranian counterparts in Oman for another round of talks slated for Sunday. We'll see if any of that changes with all this news, but it's something that we are keeping a big eye on.
A last-ditch effort to try to stop this.
And normally, if the State Department issues a warning to a consulate somewhere in the world, that's not abnormal, right? Saying, hey, there's some tensions or some travel warning, we're taking care of our staff. That's not abnormal. What's abnormal is how broad these orders and all started to happen at the exact same time yesterday afternoon and evening. But in Iraq, the State Department has ordered non-emergency personnel at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad and the consulate in Erbil to depart immediately. Israel travel restrictions are placed on U.S. diplomatic personnel amid concerns tied to regional instability. What they've actually said is if you are in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, don't leave the city. Yes, and if you're not there, go to a major city and remain there. Don't just be going throughout the country. In Bahrain and Kuwait, very similar to what they issued in Iraq, they've authorized voluntary departure of U.S. government employees and family members at U.S. embassies. And then you have the military family evacuation. This is from the Department of Defense and Pete Hegseth. They have authorized military families in Bahrain and Kuwait to very large military installations with a lot of Americans that live there because they work on the base and have their family there. The U.S. government will voluntarily evacuate you from Bahrain and Kuwait and cover the transportation costs. There's also this maritime warning. This is from the UK. Maritime Trade Operations issued a warning to commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf of Oman, and the Persian Gulf. This is a very rare and abnormal warning issued on commercial shipping in these areas. And this all comes at the time when we see that the IAEA has done, for the first time in 20 years, they have formally declared Iran in breach of its non-proliferation obligations. So things are heightening. We know that the IAEA says that Iran has enough enriched uranium for potentially making 9 nuclear bombs. And the tone from our president has started to change as well, who was very optimistic he could cut a deal with the Iranians. But we're starting to hear even that language change ahead of this Sunday meeting in Oman.
If there is a war in the Middle East, I think you're going to see quite a bit of the news attention shift. And look, I don't want there to be war. We pray for the end of war in general, but look, we live in a reality where war is real, war is happening, and at some point there are all these tipping points, and these tipping points eventually could lead there. Well, now, the meeting that's going to happen, Will, in Oman, maybe we need to give people a bit of what's happening here, because they've had these meetings before, recently, where the U.S. officials have sat down with members of the Iranian government and said, okay, let's try to come up with some sort of solution here. In the background, as we know, though, that they are funding what's happening in Gaza. They are funding what's happening to Israel.
And what these are direct talks.
Including sending direct rockets. You know, like this,
right.
You know, it's not like it's all a shell game.
Right. These are direct talks between negotiators from the United States, led by Steve Witkoff, who has done remarkable work in some of these high-level, high-risk negotiations with governments around the world. And they are negotiating with their Iranian counterparts to try and reach a deal, and not a deal like the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action under Obama, where they gave lots and lots of money with no real restrictions and no real oversight on the Iranians. They were trying to get to a place where they could monitor and restrict and ensure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon through these talks. The president and the team were optimistic. Obviously, you're going into something like this. You want to be optimistic that you can reach an outcome. But that tone has shifted. And this is, I believe, the 6th round of these talks. They've met in Switzerland. They've met in Oman before. And they are trying to get to the end point where there doesn't have to be a war. And I think it'd be interesting. I know we have a lot of people that call in that may have served or have seen what happened with even the war in Iraq. And I think that's where a lot of people's fears are. And I think where President Trump's fear is
a bit like March of 2002.
And when we went in there, we were in for a very long time to seek regime change from Saddam Hussein's regime. And it was on the premise of he had weapons of mass destruction. Yeah. Now it seems like deja vu all over again. I know that there are many people within the regime of Iran that will never change, including the Ayatollah, but also within the Trump administration, including President Trump himself, that don't want another forever war Iraq on their hands.
Some people write in all their yearbooks.
What do they
never
write?
Change.
Never change. But so that's where I'm curious what our callers even think. Mm-hmm. We know that Iran is a real threat. Iran is probably a much more real threat than Saddam Hussein. We know that they have these proxy wars that are going on.
They at least want it.
Right.
You know, they want to have these wars.
I just hope President Trump does support and help them in this endeavor to attack Iran, which I think his heart's in the right place, but I think sometimes, he always says he's a deal maker, and I just don't think he can make deals with people that just, sponsor terrorism. They don't have our same values, and they want to kill us and everyone else.
The vein of Islam that the Iranians have, the Shia sect of Islam, is very apocalyptic. They are trying to usher in the apocalypse by doing things like annihilating Israel, which will bring the 12th Imam to the world, and then Islam will be dominate of the earth, according to their theology. So they are theocratic, genocidal dictators that want to take over the world, and they want to use their religion and their might to do that. So, and in your comment, you mentioned that we said this appearances could look like an Iraq 2.0. I think that is a lot of people's concern. I think Iraq and Iran are vastly different, completely different scenario, but that's why we're asking for calls. Is that how you feel? Is that what your concern is? I think that Iran needs to be stopped and their nuclear weapon program knocked out.